Hello, and welcome to something new, although not new. But it's the first time I've branched out really from looking at British ships in UAD, and there's been a reason for that. I showed an American ship, but that's not really me getting out of my comfort zone, is it? And I've even designed a Japanese cruiser, but that's also not getting out of my comfort zone, is it? No, this time, well, you might have already noticed the flags up there. Austro-Hungarian ship, and there's going to be an Italian ship. And to be honest, it's me trying out a battle which never happened. Me trying out something which, honestly, I'd have loved to have happened. Not from the point of view of the people dying, because no historian loves that, but from the perspective of it would shift the battle to, understanding of dreadnought warfare dramatically if it had taken place. What battle am I talking about? The Francisco Caracola class versus the Adriatic Monarch. The Italians versus the Austro-Hungarians. Remember, the same people who had fought the steam ram, but also had singled the beginning of the age, which inevitably lead to the dreadnought. This would have been a battle for the ages. This would have been a battle which would have taught a lot of people about naval warfare. You see, the problem is when the British fight the Germans, the British are expected to win. Because the Germans win, oh, that's wonderful, that's technology. But if the British win, oh, of course they're going to win. They're the British, or they're producing a huge number of numbers. And to be honest, that's the British plan. The British plan was always to use the superior infrastructure, industry, etc., to outproduce the Germans. What's worse is using that same industry and infrastructure, they were pretty much able to build better ships than the Germans. Which probably sounds strange. It's one of those things we talk about. The ships, German ships, are such quality, etc. They are very high quality. They are good ships for a nation which has taken up shipbuilding quite so recently relative to the other its competitors. But, and especially compared to the French. There again, French, we've been over before, are just weird. And this is saying, one of my favourite teachers at school didn't get dyslexia. But he was the French master. He was funny to listen to. I do not dislike the French on site or anything like that. It's just, and I know there are French people who occasionally watch my videos. Please. I tell you when the British build ugly ships. We do, occasionally. But France goes through phases of either all ugly or all beautiful. They are either the things which make your heart sing and go, oh, magnifique, or make you want to puke. The Italians and Austrians don't do this. The Italians and Austrians, they produce good quality ships. Italians more than the Austrians. So yes, the Italians would probably have outnumbered the Austrians in any fight. But there again, the Austrians produced very good ships. The Hungarians produced very, very good ships. And I think if the Adriatic Monarch class and the Tegedots had combined into a battle fleet and had managed to pick their time of coming out, so they had all of them versus whatever the Italians had available, I think that would have been a battle which would truly have been about the skill of the admirals. Now, I'm going to, in a second, show you the designs. I have built, and I'm going to talk about them in comparison to their real-world designs, their real-world examples, and how similar I've got them in UAD. And then we're going to do the game. And whilst the battle is going on, whilst the battle is raging, and I haven't done a battle with this many combatants on a video before, so it could be juddery as anything, in which case, if it is, I apologize now. We'll go for it. While going for it, I'm going to answer some of the interesting comments which have come in on various videos. So what I'll do is talk about a video, pick out a video, a comment on my comment list, and tell you which video it's from and discuss it. Hopefully you enjoy, but I thought that would be a thing to talk about while it's going on. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be different, and as said, I haven't done this before. This is going to be a completely even match. This is realistic as it can come using UAD. 4v4. Whole class is built. What's interesting about this is it fulfills another point. It is likely to have happened if war had been put off till 1918. That is a reality. War. It's one of the battles we miss out on because war starts in 1914. But there are also other things which would happen if war had been held off till 1918. For starters, the German Navy probably still had to have some of their 11-inch battleships in service, whereas the Royal Navy would probably not have had a single 12-inch in service. I've said this before, I'll say it again. They would have either gone off with the Commonwealth navies, or they would have been scrapped. Maybe a couple in reserve, but honestly, they replaced all the 12-inch with 15-inch ships. Because the Royal Navy doesn't have infinite money. It's phasing out the pre-dreadnoughts, so probably the Dreadnoughts 12-inch ships would replace the pre-dreadnoughts in the reserve. Pre-dreadnoughts would get sold off. 15-inch ships would get built, and then whatever comes after the 15-inch ships, might be more 15-inch ships, probably would be another batch of them after the R's, and then whatever came next would get rid of them. So you would be talking about ships that would be ordered in 1915, ships that would be ordered in 1916. By 1918, you probably don't have any 12-inch in service, or even in reserve, and the 13.5s are probably all in reserve. Who's in charge of the Grand Fleet in 1918? Well, that becomes a rather interesting thing, because the odds are Jellicoe wouldn't be, and odds are Beatty wouldn't be either. Odds are Jellicoe is First Sea Lord, and he might do something like many predecessors have done, become promoted Admiral of the Fleet, in which case he could do a double time as First Sea Lord, right, like Fisher and like other predecessors had. The odds are, under those circumstances, if he does, that BT turns into something approximating Jellicoe's, well, Lord Beresford, in terms of being annoyed, because he probably won't get to it. But you do have a whole generation of officers coming up at that point, who are the generation behind Jellicoe and BT, who would be the fleet commander. And they're interesting. There is a very real possibility that by 1918, the Rear Admiral of 1914, Hood, is a Vice Admiral, maybe even an Admiral, in charge of the battlecruiser force. There is a real possibility that some of those admirals who are lost in the war, some of those admirals who go on to could have gone on to great rank and been quite interesting. What would a Buff not have been? Certainly connected, he could be quite a powerful station commander. And all that's rather interesting to think about, but honestly, that doesn't capture my attention nearly half as much as the idea of what would have happened if the Francisco Caracola class and the Erzat Monarch had fought a battle. Because you couldn't get two more evenly matched classes built by a... Yes, one has 15-inch guns, the other doesn't. But one has 10 guns, the other 8. 10 14-inch versus 8 15-inch. Very similar armor specs. The Desert Monarch class, officially going to be designed for 21 knots. That's Coca-Cola, 28 knots. Which is a dramatic speed. If they had been built, the Francisco Coca-Cola would have been the first fast battleships. And they really do explain the point I've been trying to make to many people over the years, in that battlecruisers do not fit the Mediterranean, but fast battleships really do fit the Mediterranean. Battlecruisers fit large oceans where they have room to maneuver. The Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian. These are all good oceans for a battlecruiser to be operating in, where they have room to maneuver. Places like the South China Sea, the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the North Sea, definitely the Baltic, are not places where you can maneuver. Because the main advantage for a battlecruiser is not maneuverability at slow speeds, it's maneuverability to high speeds. And the trouble is, when something is going at 30 plus knots and weighs in at 30,000 plus tons, stopping it is interesting. Turning it is even more so. And you're likely to realize there was that small rocky outcrop that was there when you run over it. Not what you want for those kind of seas. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, we'll get to the video and I'll explain the design. So, I flipped a metaphorical coin, and it is the Adriatic Monarch class which I'm showing you first, or rather my version of them. I know it's not quite correct. I know in real life their funnels were the same height. And they only had one mast, not two. But this is within the nature of the game. It fits. Now, for the Adriatic Monarch class, I have a displacement of 24,000, roughly 500 tons. But, and I say this with all due love in my heart, I honestly don't think you're going to build these ships for that small amount. If you are, you're cutting corners somewhere, and this is actually technically the lightest I can get this one. As you can see, Dreadnought 2 goes down as low as 29,000, so I could have used that. But that doesn't really accommodate the treble turrets that well without causing stability issues. I did try an Adriatic Monarch class out earlier. I haven't tried them out against each other, but I tried an Adriatic Monarch class out before. So I went with the Dreadnought 3 because, frankly, you needed the extra stability. I know, theoretically it's only +5 extra stability, so it shouldn't make that much of a difference, but thanks to these, it does. That is good looking from the front. As you'll notice, lots and lots of 6-inch guns. Festooned with them almost. And again, I've gone with deck torpedo tubes because you're supposed to have 8 torpedo tubes. But the trouble is, when I was going for the underwater torpedo tubes, you only had the option of putting in 2. And well, 4 if you consider 2 each side. Which wasn't enough and wouldn't have been accurate. So, she has these. Deck mounted. Not in a place I would want to be manning them if I were myself. Anyway, theoretically, as she's designed in real life, she would be powered by 15 Yarrow boilers, have 31,000 shaft horsepower, 4 shafts, top speed of 21 knots, and capable of 5,000 nautical miles at 10 knots. Well, this vessel is capable of 10,000 kilometers. 5,000 nautical miles is 9,300 kilometers at 21 knots. What can I say? She would have a crew, according to her design, of roughly 1,100 officers and men. And my design has a crew of complement of 1,459. So let's put the down to cramped quarters. That takes me down to 1,200, which is roughly equivalent to what you would have had in real life. I've given them veteran capabilities because, honestly, I feel that's me being kind. And 1,201 I will accept as being close enough to what you're supposed to. $23 months build time, cost of $78 million. The proposed cost of these was 83 million kronen. So probably about the right level. Engine power 36,534 horsepower. Okay, 4,000 more than my nearly 5,000 more actually than the designed for officially. But yeah, everything pretty much checks out. And of course, she had 350mm guns or 14-inch guns. Right, let's consider what won the toss to become my ships for this operation, this exercise. Technically, I will be in charge of them. They are the Francisca Caracola class, but I've named this altar Francisco Morosini because I thought that was fair. Anyway, so their displacement would be 34,000 tons fully loaded. And again, I've gone with Dreadnought 3. I could have gone with Dreadnought 2. But Dreadnought 3 fitted it better. It does fit the design and shape a lot better. Interesting enough, my system has managed to say it can do this on 77,186 shaft horsepower, but the installed power that we're going to put in the Francisco Caracolas was 105,000 shaft horsepower, so they might well have been doing the British standard of over-egging it. 28 knots is the speed they're supposed to be doing. And the range was 8,000 nautical miles at 10 knots or 15,000 kilometers at 10 knots. Now I've left it at 10,724 kilometers at 28 knots because that just seemed fair. And honestly, as you can't put in cruising speed range in this, that's range at top speed, that's still a lot of fuel. 4 twin 381mm, that's 15-inch guns. Well, as you can see, they are here. Hello, my pretties. And we have 12 6-inch guns. The Tekhanov, the Erzat Monarch, had 14. Well, my design, to be honest, had 16. Again, we're going with veterans. And again, the crew proposal is rather interesting for them. So I'm afraid I'm going to leave it like this with cramped conditions, even though I would like to have the standard, because that would be nice. Use those extra couple hundred people for the survival control. Everything else set up as before, with roughly things all actually accurate. I have to admit the main belt is supposed to be 11.9 inches, and I've made it 12 inches, but that's because I didn't see the point on this particular game, saving myself the amount of weight it would in difference. So that's 35,943. And 12 inches is 958. So it honestly doesn't make much of a difference. The turrets are supposed to be 15.7, and again, these are slightly upgraded 16-inch. So this is by far and away probably the better ship. However, as said before, this is going to be a fleet action. There are going to be 4 versus 4. In which case, the aggregate factors which normally affect ship-on-ship combat could have a different basis, because as gorgeous as these are, their range is not that dissimilar to the 14-inch gun. And for them to get in range of firing their 15-inch guns at the Erzat Monarch class, they've got to get in range, therefore, of the Erzat Monarch's 14-inch guns. Now, that may or may not have an impact. Those extra 2 guns per ship, 8 more guns overall, may have an impact. They may not. We're just going to have to see. Either way, it's going to be fun. So here we go. The most even battle you could possibly have. Now, I have to admit, I'm going to do one thing to change things. Make sure the AI is in charge. Make sure they're on avoiding torpedoes. And speed it all up for you, because I don't want to torture you all for hours. I have actually now can tell you that I have had one of these simulations go on when I let it play and was just running it to see the results of what would happen. It managed to last for 6.5 hours. It was fun. So, to the comments. I want to go see this ship in closer order. Oh, Regina Margarita. Oh, cool name. They do look good at sea, this class. I'm not sure if I quite captured the Francisca Caracola, but I managed to get the broad outstrokes outline right. I will add that very nice people do keep donating to my PayPal, and the PayPal fund raising money for the Haida trip, and thank you very much for that. It is, when this goes out, it will still be live. It'll be live until the Tuesday, so the 22nd. So, still time if you're feeling kind and generous, but don't feel you have to. I'm overwhelmed by it, frankly. Right then. So let's start off with Strider. Hello. Nothing. This was a comment on the most pointless mission, Operation Plan Number 2. Nothing screams freedom like that picture of a Liffey. What a sight that would have been, other than Mel Gibson. No, I think a Liffey screams it better than Mel Gibson. But I'm presuming you mean the picture of all the ships parked at a Liffey. And then you think about just how few aircraft the Japanese were sending to attack there. Andrew Cox, on the same video. The forlorn hope is still a hope, however unlikely it is to succeed. True. For the same one, Bill Bond, one less tropical storm, one less navigational error. The US fleet was caught napping. It was always going to be a long shot. Yes, the US fleet was caught napping. But not really. in terms of it was always going to be a long shot. It would have been a long shot if they committed enough aircraft. Even the 54 would have been better. Oh, good lord! I think the 14 inches got the shots in first. Oh my! Did I remember to fit the torpedoes to the Francisco Caracola class? If I didn't, we'll soon find out when they're all sunk by torpedoes. Then I'll have to reset and do this. The thing is, Bill, and it's a good point, yes, the fates of the war can change things. The fate of the world can shift on one storm. But, and I say this with love in my heart for it all, there is a limitation to what you can achieve. There is a limitation to what you can achieve under those circumstances. So, if you want to achieve what they're planning on achieving in terms of a decisive victory, then they need to have actually supported it enough. Then Roland Cash responds as well. The 54 planes may not seem much, but when you have the blessings of the God Emperor, they'll be like 54,000. Maybe in Warhammer 40k. Unfortunately, the God Emperor in Japan in World War II is not quite the same level of power. And my response is no, it will still be 54 planes, which, if they had the same luck as Tan 2, would translate to 4 actually attacking. That's the reality. We can talk about a single storm, but it's not a single storm. In the nicest way, there are aircraft which never even make it to the storms before having to turn back or crashing. Out of 24, 2 arrive over a Liffey. One of those hits a target. You launch 54, well, that's 4 plus whatever, well, 4 1/4, because there's 6 left. Oh, it's just maybe 4.5 aircraft get there. Let's round up and say 5 aircraft reach, and let's be nice and say 3 hit their targets. That's going to devastate the US Navy, isn't it? One of the things I'm interested by is that the Japanese didn't consider really seem to consider a solo carrier strike, or as I was talking about in the live and the long patrol, a use of their twin-engined longer range aircraft to do a mass attack, a mass bomb and kamikaze attack in those aircraft would have devastated many of the ships, especially if they managed to get there under the same circumstances where they hadn't been spotted coming. Jequits, hello. But 1436, so at that point in bomb control, the Japanese torpedo bombers were pretty good. Off the top of my head, they sunk the Prince of Wales and Repulse. Several ships at Pearl Harbor, including Oklahoma, helped sink Lexington and Hornet and sunk damaged other ships like Chicago and Houston. Okay, so now my answer to this was yes and no. The 4 sea events happened in deep water, and I'm presuming this is to do with the torpedoes diving. And at Pearl Harbor, considering the number of torpedoes dropped, the number of hits versus number of torpedoes stuck in the Mother Sea is incredibly low. This is not to say they weren't good for their time, but to say that to score enough hits, they need a lot more than 27 aircraft taking part. This is the point I'm making. If you look at, they turn up with hundreds of aircraft at Pearl Harbor. If they'd had the same hit ratio as the Royal Navy achieved at Taranto, then there wouldn't have been a single US battleship in a capability to float again. In fact, they'd have had enough left over, they'd have probably destroyed the floating docks as well, and everything else there, because they just would have been able to. But they didn't, because they didn't have that sort of scenario. Let's go see how the Zat Monarchs are doing. They're seem to be being commanded with the usual Austrian vim and vigor. Ooh, there's a Zat Monarch on the stern. quite happy, unmolested. Same with Heligage. Sventistevan! Hello, Sventistevan! We are happy to see you. And Erzog Ferdinand Max. Oh, hello, you. And you have been hit. But you're okay. You're, broadly speaking, doing alright. Let's get back to my division. San Pio has been hit. Regina Margherita is falling out of line. Francisco Morsini seems to be doing okay. Doing alright. Oh no, she's not falling out of line, she's just going around in a circle. Falling up to the rear, slowed down? I'm not sure, but she seems to be having an interesting time. The current speeds are San Pio, 26.3 knots. Cole Vimosa, 28 knots. Regina Margherita, 20 knots. And Francisco Morsini is down to 14 knots, 14.9 knots. Building up speed slowly. Obviously, be suffering damage. This is not a 15-inch versus an 18-inch battle. This is not a 15-inch versus a 12-inch battle. This is a 15-inch versus a 14-inch battle, and it's not good for either side. Although it does seem to me like the 14-inch guns are coming off better. Richard Cutts, hello. You've done a comment you did on HMS Tiger, the battlecruiser hunter, a UAD infused discussion not that long ago, about 12 hours ago before recording this. So, see, this is going to a quick response, although this will come out far later, so not that quick a response. I'm rewatching this video, and it could be argued that you could use 13-inch guns instead of 14-inch, since the original ship used 13.5-inch guns. Using the small gun would also simulate the poor quality of shells prior to interaction with Green Boys. True, but the actual firing characteristics, it seems to me, from the UAD is that the 14-inch is more closer to 13.5. But as I said, I would like a 13.5. Bidron, the squeaky chair squeaks again. Didn't want you to be disappointed. And I do WD-40 and look after the chair, but it doesn't seem to last that long. Narrow Ground. I also play Red Alert 2. How? Well, excellent. I'm glad you played Red Alert 2. It was a good game. Brew ship 73. Some old, some new. None borrowed, but some blue. Christopher. Hello, Christopher. How are you doing? Okay. Reference to Battle River Plate and out-of-the-box thinking. Is it really out-of-the-box thinking, or just a case of a man falling back on training experience and making the same comfortable calls he would have leading a destroyer squadron in the last war? Well, this is an interesting thing. You can both argue that as being yes, but it's actually making the transition to think about thinking. So it's comfortable calls in terms of how he would run with destroyers. Seems to me that the Italians, which I were expecting to walk away with this, are getting smattered at the moment. I'm not quite sure how, but they are. I don't think they're in torpedo range, so it ain't that as far as I can tell. But, yeah, is it really those extra 2 guns? Are they making that big a difference already? Ooh, this could cause a rewrite discussion. 14-inch gun, more powerful than you think, especially if you have enough of them. Imagine what they'd be like with 12 of these things. But getting back to the River Plate discussion, it's one thing. It is one thing to command a cruiser, and it is another to command a destroyer and a destroyer group. And you are taught differences in the Navy, and you're taught to respect those differences and taught to benefit from those differences because they have different styles of command, or different styles of leadership, and different styles of operation. And this is a big thing, especially in a Navy which is cruiser orientated. And you have to remember, Harwood had spent much of his career as a cruiser officer. So to suddenly go, you know what, I'm not going to handle these things as a cruiser, I'm going to handle them as a destroyer. It is out of the box. It's the actual operation itself is straight out of the destroyer box. I do agree. But making that decision, jumping through that tradition, actually doing that, something he talked about before, but actually no one had really had enacted or thought about and actually done, that is something else. That is something different. So that's the point. The actual handling itself, no, that's not out of the box thinking. I couldn't claim it. But making a decision to go to that box, that's out of the box thinking because those boxes are quite so well guarded. Siege of Corfu. Hello. DH89 comments. This was a nice change of pace going back to Napoleon Wars. Another good thing in Corfu's favour as a travel destination is the amazing food. Agreed. And, well, yeah. I'm going to try and wander about a bit more. I like doing the cruises, and I'm keeping to the cruises, and of course I've got UAD working well so I can do these. But I'm hoping to get an Age of Sail version going at some point. Not of UAD, probably of Total War. Empires. But once I've sort of got those things up and running, I would like to do more Age of Sail stuff and more of the grand strategy stuff because I think it's quite fun to get into and discuss and go into detail of. Let's see. The Battle of Gites. Thomas Baloncani. Correction. The point of having a ram in an ancient naval battle is not to sink enemy vessels. In the words of Professor Boris Rankov, the crew in a trireme is about a third of the 445-ton displacement. Trireme, yes. Once you're onto a 100-ton Quinker Marine, probably a little bit less than a third. Once you punch the hole in the enemy hull, what will happen is that your ballast gets out as quickly as it can, and you end up with these floatabouts. It is one of the reasons why we have basically no wrecks of ancient ships. If at all possible, they would be captured and reused rather than left to sink. After all, the Royal Navy in its Age of Sail heydays showed how much easier it is to expand and maintain a fleet by capturing enemy vessels, supplement your own, rather than just leave them to sink. Plus, bronze rounds are expensive. If you can capture their own, you already are saving up on new construction. Also, the lack of ballast meant that there was nothing pushing the wreck into the bottom and protecting it instead of being corroded away over the time. There's also very little evidence of the use of corvus at all. One of the reasons is when calculating optimal width for the Olympias, John Coates found out the ship went from quite stable and fightable to completely unstable in the water within a range of 10 centimeters width, 4 inches. The corvus would just add top weight and instability into a system that's already optimized in the ratio of lightness and therefore reduce draft. For those interested, there's an in-depth discussion on YouTube titled "The Greek Trireme, an Ancient Warship and Its Reconstruction" by Professor Boris Rankov, the crew in by Professor Rankov, Boris Rankov, which I highly recommend. Now, this was my response because far be it from me to argue with a professor as eminent as Boris is. And I think the Italians are in trouble because they're down to 3 out of 4. I think the Austro-Hungarians are doing better. That is certainly one school of thought on the subject, and Rankov is one of its best proponents. I'm not in agreement with everything. They say mainly because water tends to act as its own ballast when let in with enough force. The Corvus, well, as they said, they'd stopped using it by this battle, and respected naval architects have done the sums to say it could be carried. Using it's a different matter. Ram and board is certainly a viable plan, but it will depend upon angle and also damage control, to which, under those circumstances, would not have been easy. Although likely done by the crew of the ship, which have been rammed in the most part. Furthermore, it's also true that the Mediterranean is not the best preserver of wooden ships. There are too high an organism concentration. It's cold waters like the Great Lakes, and Baltic and Antarctic that preserve ships well as a rule. Of course, though there are exceptions. And the point is, we have now found in some spaces where we switch battles fields of rams. We have literally found the rams on the bottom. Now, yes, there is a possibility that the ram is knocked off when it comes into contact with the enemy's ship. That is a possibility. There is also the possibility that the ram is the only thing surviving of the ship that it sank with, which is just as likely, if not more so. And when I say fields of rams, I mean we found dozens of them. Hundreds in one, I think, in one place. I think it's just over 100. The archaeology papers are full of all sorts of stuff which make various claims, and I'm waiting for the journal articles to come out before I'd be absolutely sure. But the thing is, we have found those rams. So that, to me, suggests that things aren't as clear-cut. And I don't think they have to be. I don't think there necessarily is one way to do things. I think there also it depends on what era you're talking about. I think there is what would happen in some eras and what would happen in other eras. Let's go to the last remaining afloat. Eric Colvin Sony. Oh, you poor thing. Oh my god, they're all gone and that's the only one left. That's just destructive. Go Austria-Hungary. This is one of the most beautiful ships ever designed, and you are basically have mangled it for no losses. So the point I'm trying to make is that we don't really know enough about ancient naval warfare. We really don't. We know the numbers involved. We know that they were colossal. We know that the troops involved were as specially trained as they could be. We know the importance of rowers. We know the sailors. We know what the crews were doing. We do not really know how they were doing what they were doing in terms of what were their tactics, what were their doctrines. In a nice way, Polybius and the other sources don't really give us enough of that kind of detail. And I would say, Thomas Bassani, you do reply nicely, because you go, true, hopefully one day we may get such an exception, aside from the Nemi ships, which I've been studying for some years now, which are built along lines of large polyremes and the bow timbers in the Athlete Ram. We do not have anything to go by as far as ancient warships are concerned. We really don't. And that is a sad, sad thing. That is the reality, but it's a sad, sad thing. Operation Can number 2, 77 years ago. It's my understanding that by 1945, the Japanese still had a large number. This is from GeoGuy 001. It was my understanding that by 1945, the Japanese still had a large number of Army and Navy aircraft, but they were held back for kamikaze operations in defense of the home island. True, but if you're going to, let's be honest, I would argue taking out the American carrier fleet to buy more time for the home islands before any potential invasion would be defense of the home islands, so therefore freeing up some aircraft for such an operation would seem sensible. Königsberg class from Königsberg class of Reichsmaschine, Long Shoal, from Eric Smith. These are not warships, they're training ships. They contain all the elements of the later larger ships. Triple turrets, twin AA, pod torpedoes, and all the associated targeting equipment. Turbines and diesel. Building these systems built the industrial capacity to build a large version later. And they even threw in mine laying to maintain institutional knowledge. And then they sailed them around the world. The officers and MTOs would then go on to crew the bigger ships. If you look at them as classrooms, they make a lot more sense, I think. How similar were the diesels to submarine engines? I don't think they were that similar, but I am actually checking into that. But what I would say is, even if I treat the Königsberg class as classrooms, then I'm not sure why you're building more than one. And even if you are building two and you're building them as classrooms, the moment they're going to become part of your warfighting fleet, which they are, by default, even if you're thinking of war for them in 1940s, these ships are not going to be gone by then, they're still useful. You might want to do some actual considerations of their fighting role. You need to. You need to think about it. And they didn't. They really didn't. Anyway, that's enough comments, I think. Let's see. This has been a painful battle for me to watch. I've been trying to cover it up by the comments, but as you all know, I'm a big fan of the Francisco Caracola class, but I had a suspicion this might happen, because the 14-inch is not that dissimilar. And these ships are a very capable design. Even if I do say so myself, but it's based off the Erzak Monarch class, I really can't take credit for it. If I could, I'd take command of them and finish it off quicker, but I'm not going to order this poor ship onto a suicide run just to finish these things off. It's painful to watch. Poor ship. Only one left. Only one still going. And it's basically getting pounded. It's doing, 6 knots. Not good. Not good at all. I feel very sorry for it. I really do. Testimony to the construction quality of the Austro-Hungarian ships, but also perhaps testimony to the reality that 15-inch does not represent that much of an advantage over 14-inch. So if you're ever asking a question, what would happen if the 13.5s hadn't been selected and instead Britain had gone with a 14-inch gun, well, you can now see the reason why the Queen Elizabeth would no longer not have been 15-inch. They would have been 16-inch. Which would itself have been an interesting thing, because it almost guarantees then that the R class would have been 16-inch. And then we'd have then had a Hood would have been 16-inch guns, the Renown Repulse would have been 16-inch guns, and the Royal Navy would have had a commonality of force of 16-inch gun ships. The question then becomes, what replaces, Nelson Rodney? Do they still get replaced with 2 ships? Possibly the British do. Well, do they get 16-inch ships again? If they do, then the Royal Navy now, at that point, would have the world's largest collection of 16-inch gun ships, and would be, up until the King George V, would probably have achieved a uniform design and construction. There's also the fact that they would all been slightly bigger, so the odds are terrible. But if Hood's bigger, and if all the others are slightly bigger, then the odds are the limit of the Washington Treaty is set slightly bigger. There's also the fact that the Americans at that point want to stop constructing. If the British have the 5Rs, the 5 Queen Elizabeths, 2 Renown, Repulse, Hood, all with 16-inch guns. That's 13 16-inch gun battleships. The US Navy wouldn't have had anywhere near 13 16-inch gun battleships in 1918, 1920, and that's something they would have to deal with. It could have changed the entire tenor of the conversation. It could have also changed what the US Navy were building, though. Because the US Navy could have decided, well, you know, we're not building 16-inch gun ships because the British are building them. We're going to build, because they went, instead of going for 15, they went for 16 to build bigger ship and bigger, more powerful ships. So they could have gone, well, we'll go for 17-inch. Or maybe even the US Navy goes for 18-inch. Imagine that, if the treaty limit is set at 18-inch. 18-inch, 41,000 tons. What could I build for a Nelson and Rodney class at that point? Who knows? It could be interesting. But I'm sorry, little ship. You are not long for this world. I wish I could have done something to change this, other than cheating. I set them up quite well. Quite fair. Wow. Its ships in this division are able to reach a maximum speed of 5 knots. Ouch. 5.2 knots. It's going to be gone shortly. It is. But again, that's something to consider. 14-inch instead of 13.5, 16 instead of 15, an all 16-inch fleet, what will the impact on history be? And the reason we consider this sort of history, and the reason we consider those sort of discussions, is it better illuminates why the decisions that were made were made. I.e., what would they have done in the different circumstance tells you why they did what they did, part of why they did what they did, in the circumstance that they did it. Because it's still factors. There are still, those factors don't change. The context and the wider situation doesn't change just because you're allowed 16-inch rather than 15-inch guns, or 14-inch rather than 13.5-inch guns. What changes is the details of those initial events, which then will have an impact on subsequent events. Again, for the German Navy, the appearance of 14-inch guns rather than 13.5-inch guns would have caused them tremendous issues. 16-inch guns would have carried on those issues, because they're starting from an 11-inch gun, which they work up to a 12-inch gun. And then they'd be looking for a 14-inch gun, and then they'd be looking for a 16-inch gun. And at a certain point, you have to wonder if they'd actually be going to Americans go, do you want to develop an 18-inch gun together? It's an option. It is an option. Oh my lord. Okay, you're just coming close now to be evil, aren't you? You're getting into torpedo range. Run, Francisco! Run! Or rather, run, Calvo Russi! Run! The Ferdinand Marx is coming towards you, and yeah, there's the torpedoes. Out of torpedoes, using 6-inch guns. Oh my lord, they're finishing me off with a 6-inch. That's just not fair. I've still got 6-inch, and I've still got 15-inch firing away. So I wouldn't get too close if I were you. I could still take one of them with me. I could still take one of them with me. One I could still get. Victory will be mine over one of you! It just turned broadside on. Alpha Storm. Can I turn? You're gonna come get close to me, I'm gonna make sure I'm able to fire my guns at you. Because you only have 6-inch guns, but I have 15. Oh, I would love to ram you, but I doubt I'd make it. Go down in a blaze of glory. Ooh. Come on, 15-inch guns, do your work. That's what I have you for. One of the interesting pieces of history is that the Francisco Caracola was almost turned into an aircraft carrier a la Hermes or Argus, but the Italian Navy decided to save money and not do it. It would have actually been interesting because I think it would probably been better than the burn. And if the Italians had started with carrier aviation at that point, they might well have had far more adapted and far more integrated naval aviation in World War II, which could have made a very big difference. You're literally crossing her T. Fire, flooding, destroyed funnels. That's good. Don't worry, she won't be crossing your T, because I plan on hiding you behind her. That will be my trick, to hide you behind her. Mm-hmm. This is going to be short, sharp, and at a certain point, probably painful for me. I'm feeling you're not long for this world, my lady. Whereas you appear to be having a boisterously good time. You can do it. You can do it, Urkel. You can do it. I have faith in you. Come on, Urkel. You can sink that prince. Or Urzog. You can sink it. You can. Look at how much you've taken it down already. You can do this. You can do this. It will be your glorious death ride, but you will be able to do this. You are now more water than ship. As said, more water than ship. 15% flotation and 40% structure. Good lord. Well, I know this isn't fair because I've taken command of the Urkel, but you know, even if I win this, I'm still against 3 of them. Mm-hmm. You can do it. Keep hitting her. Keep hitting her. Ah, yes, we have sunk her. Now I need to do the same to the other 3. Where are they? Let's go hunting. This is kind of like a one of those obscene versions of a you know, the Black Knight, the guy who keeps getting his leg and all that, everything cut off. This goes the Curl Vittorioso going, I am coming at 5 knots with 71% of my crew aboard at 40% structure and 15% floating. I'm still coming. At that point, find a home and settle down. Seriously. Are you not moving at all now? Doesn't appear to be even moving. Doesn't appear to even be making steerage way. Okay. I have a feeling she might be going to sink shortly. I'm not sure why, but enemy smoke is spotted in the northeast. Let's see if she can get going. Come on. You can do it. You can do it, AI. You can get her going. You can get her going. Ay, caramba. It's to the point that if I was in command of the enemy, you can guarantee what I'd be doing, which would be charging up close and just going, I'm finishing you. I am finishing you. Or alternatively, I could be nice and end this now, while Cole Vittorioso is still alive, and go, well, that proves that they could have survived. But she's still moving. Enemy smoke spotted to the north. North of where I go. See if I can spot them. There are 4 of them. Only one of them is sinking. I have 1 battleship. I know where that is. Where are they? Ow. We will find them another time. So what did that teach? Well, oh my lord, what did that teach me? I'll have to run it again and again and again to get conclusions, and this is one of the things you have to do. One of the worlds which computer games have really brought up, and some of the developments we've developed in simulation software have really allowed us to do, is we can start simulating some of these actions and putting them through realistic analysis. Sometimes ships will lose in one-on-ones, but win in group-on-groups. And every time there is a sort of reasoning you can go on behind it. And sometimes there's the fact that in one-on-one, 10 versus 8, 10 14-inch versus 8 15-inch, victory goes to whichever ship spots the other one first. But when you're dealing with 40 14-inch versus 32 15-inch, the differences start to add up. The likelihood of a critical hit starts to add up. Again, I'll have to do it again before I can prove it. I like to do something called forensic engineering analysis. This is something I use a lot in my work, and is one of the reasons why sometimes I reach different conclusions than perhaps my peers who read paper. Because I think the paper descriptions of plans can only take you so far. Until you can imagine that plan in a 3D way and go through that plan forensically looking at it, but also the accounts of the construction, the way it's designed, built, you can't really understand that plan. Not in the same way. This is why I would argue that the works like the various naval architects who have done great historical stuff, really, really good historical stuff, you know. Most famous being most being D.K. Brown and the historians such as John Roberts and Norman Freeman, who have done a tremendous amount of work in this area. But they've gone as far as, to an extent, I would say their technology allowed them to go. Although, never say that to Norman Freeman, because I have sent him a link to UAD, Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought, and I'm fairly sure he'll be downloading it shortly and using it. The point is, you can test these designs now. You can do things with them you couldn't do. And you can really work through what are the points which we don't know. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, when you're designing a ship, and you're designing a ship, there are a lot of things which aren't written down in your instructions. There are a lot of things which are taken for granted. There are a lot of things which are presumed. You know how much space the Royal Navy will want for ceremonial. You know how much space the Royal Navy will need for certain things. That'll be put in. You know what type of ropes they use, what type of uniforms, how much storage space they need to give to their personnel. Sometimes it'll be written down, but it'll be written down as one whole locker. How will the locker be set up? How will the spaces be set apart, allocated? The minutiae might go into that, but honestly, as time has gone on, governments have got more prescriptive. I think the figure I was told the other day by someone who is a specialist in this, and I haven't done the research myself, was that Ajax had 1,500 requirements given to it for its design and construction, the Ajax program for the Army. CVRT, program it's sort of replacing, anyways, which was very successful as a family of vehicles, and I suppose in many ways the Boxer and CB90 would be the most equivalent modern vehicles system to it, had just 200. Now, one is a 1970s design, it's a 2010 design. There's 40-odd years difference. And there's been an exponential growth. And you can say there are many reasons behind this. For starters, you can say that when the British Army was ordering the CVRTs, they had a huge wealth of institutional knowledge to the civil service, and all sorts of legacy systems and legacy organizations and facets of their organization, which allowed them a far stronger ability to interface with the companies and make sure they got what they wanted without needing to specify it. I can also say that in modern international defense procurement, if you don't specify, you leave yourself open to ignoring the specifications, as people seek to get the most bang for the buck, or rather the most buck for the bang if you're the defense contractor side. So there is that reality going on. You go back further, it gets even more interesting. I would argue that in terms of ships, when they're being built, battleships, etc., even the ones of the same class being built by different yards, the yards are given a set of plans by the naval constructors that they have to work to. But if you walked into them, you would not, if you were going by their internal finishing, in terms of the carpentry style inside the captain's offices and all those sort of things, it could and often would be completely different. Probably have a similar layout most of the time, but it will be completely different carpentry. Everything is a bespoke piece built for that ship by the carpenters in the yard. And those are differences which add up. They don't make a completely different ship, but they do add up. But that's not the only difference. There can be differences in styles of shaping of the rivets. Rivet shapes can be different. Welding styles can be different. One of the things that was amazing to me is that when you're looking at the chart I provide in my book, which I will admit I do not know how, but every other version has HMS Nebian on it, but for some reason the final version, which is printed in that first edition, doesn't have HMS Nebian in it. Not to one side. But if you look at all the charts, you'll see the displacements of ships. Ships are the same designs, the displacements are different. Every single one has a different displacement. Every single one. They're built to the same design, built at the same time, using similar materials, or supposedly the same materials, but let's be honest, within the realms of metallurgy, it's probably similar materials. And yeah, they're different. They're different. So you cannot, as much as other historians would find life a lot easier and a lot nicer if they could, base off your entire analysis of a ship's design from its plans. Neither can you base it on entire understanding on the papers that are written about those plans. Design information. You can't even base it all off that stuff which is written by people who are served ship. Because the people who served on the ship know how it was used. They don't necessarily know how it was intended to be used. And that can lead to all sorts of differences of opinion. Something can be right decision if it's used as it's supposed to be and it's envisaged being used, but the wrong decision versus how it's actually used. Quite common. Which is why you need to track down the various departments in the Royal Navy who at times are providing the future proofing, at times are providing the analysis of the future of the world and what they need ships for. If I have my way, such an analysis will be my second book. When I originally proposed it, it would have been comparing the proposed navies of Japan, America, Britain, Germany, Italy, France, World War II. And the reason I'm not starting further back is I have to admit, once you get beyond 1890, it becomes slightly more interesting in terms of finding a proposed fleet versus we're building a lot of third rates and we're building a lot of fourth rates. And a humongous number of fifth rates. And it's a never-ending stream of six. And occasionally a first or a second will turn up. Well, I decided that wasn't possible. Travel is still not up there. There are all sorts of other things going on in the world. As of now, we have the inheritors of Gorshkov's legacy acting up, who appear to have not learnt the lesson of Gorshkov. Sadly enough for Russia. Very sadly for Ukraine. Anyway, leaving that to one side, I have decided instead to look at the Royal Navy. And it's going to be probably, I don't expect it to be a quick project produced this year. I expect it to be something which comes out next year. I expect it to get a large chunk of the research and writing done this year. That's my hope. And after my family are better, my mum's had to have some operations, and I'm of course off to in June. I will get into that in earnest. And there's probably arrange some writing trips where I can disappear off and ignore humanity for a few days while I'm writing. It always sounds rather rude, but it's meant in the nicest possible way. I love you all. You're wonderful. But you have a habit of inviting me to go out and eat. Or, asking me to help with carpentry. And I like doing that. The trouble is, it doesn't mean I get the writing done. And so the book itself will focus using forensic engineering, using all the reports and all the papers I can on the navies which are planned. for the First World War and the Second World War. What the Royal Navy was conceiving Navy it should be itself to be, and the war it was conceiving it was going to fight. And then I'll have to get the publisher to actually confirm at some point and agree that they're going to want it more than just in theory, want it in actual contract sense. But anyway, that's all to come. Now, I suppose the point I'm trying to make by tacking this on the end here is that UAD and other bits of software are things which are incredibly helpful for that. Spring Sharp is something which I want to get back into once I have my tower working properly, because I can do some more precise analysis in some respects there. But UAD does have a fine battle simulator mode, really fine one, and it's quite useful to use, especially I found with the torpedo boats and various other things. Once you build into the various force structures, you can do some really interesting things with them, so it will definitely be part of it. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed, and hope you're having a good Monday. Take care.